This is I Go Travel with Don Barnett, and this video is all about Custer's last stand.
You can read a lot of stuff about the Custer battle, and I don't want to repeat that stuff here. You can go to the internet and read it in books, but I'd like to tell you a few things about that battle and that time that are not so commonly known. I made 2 videos on Custer and the Battle of the Little Big Horn. This video is about Custer and the U.S. military. I'll tell you a few things about Custer and his wife Libby, who played a big part in the whole Custer story. The other video you can find on my channel on YouTube. That one is about number 3 and 4 here. The 2 main Indian military leaders and the only survivor of the Battle of the Little Big Horn, a horse called Comanche. So come on, let's find out some things that are not so commonly known about the Custer Battle of the Little Big Horn.
George Custer, he and his 7th Cavalry Regiment totally annihilated at the Battle of the Little Big Horn. Did you know he was ranked dead last in his military school, but he acquired a reputation in the Civil War as a guy who shot first and asked questions later. Both Presidents Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses Grant, after the war, saw him as a loose cannon on the deck. President Grant had him suspended from military service for 1 year. However, the war with the Indians convinced Grant to bring Custer back into service. Custer's reports of gold in the Black Hills brought in a flood of gold seekers, intensifying white Indian conflict. We are driving into the Little Bighorn battlefield. There is a nice information center and museum at the bottom of the Last Stand Hill, where Custer and his 200-plus 7th Cavalry succumbed to a larger, motivated, and skillful Indian force. The National Monument contains a large cemetery of soldiers from other wars. There's a nice short road through the park or monument where you can see the lay of the land, where several skirmishes between the 2 military forces occurred. At various places, there were interpretive signs like this one here that really made the drive an interesting thing. And there are some graves of some soldiers. In the distance, in the middle of the picture, you can see the little white markers of graves of soldiers who died, and there were markers for the Indian warriors as well. The road curved throughout the park, and it was, like I said, a very nice, interesting, and pleasant drive. No one knows the details of the battle. All soldiers died. There was no one left to tell the tale. The graves on the hillside here are those of soldiers whose families were not wealthy enough to send their bodies home. Their gravestones mark exactly where they died and were buried. Those from wealthier families were able to afford to bring their family members back home. Custer, for example, was returned to New York and is buried at the military academy at West Point. Projections like this are imaginary, and it was hand-to-hand battle rather than horses like portrayed here. 2 things happened after Custer's death that kept his image as a hero and a martyr alive. First, the very popular Buffalo Bill Cody Wild West show performed around the country and in Europe and projected Custer as a hero. Second, Custer's wife, Libby Custer, dedicated her life to a positive, heroic image of her husband. She was an extrovert, smart, popular, and wrote continually and lectured throughout the country on her late husband's accolades, and kept it up until she died nearly 60 years later, almost at the age of 90.
Let's look at Custer's fellow officers. I will mention 3 of them, and all 3, in effect, abandoned him to save their own skin.
We are in the museum at the Custer battlefield. 2 of Custer's regiment leaders never responded to help. Both Captain Reno and Captain Benteen feared the unknown Indian enemy and stayed away from the main battle area. Captain Reno eventually was dismissed from the army because of it, and Captain Benteen was suspended and soon retired. Neither showed up, but on the other hand, Custer never waited for them, but instead charged headlong into an enemy where he did not know their size, their location, their strength, or their movements. We're driving along the road through the park where there were several smaller battles and skirmishes. Interpretive signs along the road told where both soldiers and Indian warriors had been killed, and there were grave markers at these points. The third person to fail to respond to the military cause was General George Crook, ahead of over 1,000, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 soldiers. When the Battle of the Little Big Horn occurred, General Crook and his large military force could not be found anywhere. This is what happened.
Everybody seems to know about the Battle of the Little Big Horn, but did you know that there was a more important, much larger battle that occurred just a week before, about 50 kilometers to the east? And it was called the Battle of the Rosebud, along Rosebud Creek. And Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse led a force against the main general in the area with over 1,000 troops at his disposal. And instead of doing a hit and run as General Crook anticipated, Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull confronted the army straight on. And it surprised General Crook, and it scared him. Now, General Crook had been very successful in fighting the Apache down in eastern Arizona in the mountains. But out here in the plains, he was a little more less at ease. He was the adversary. The Indians could attack, hit and run, and disappear into the Great Plains. And he was uncomfortable. And this frontal attack further surprised him. And although he claimed in his military reports that they took this hill and the next hill and so on, analysis by historians later say that the correct conclusion is that Crook was stopped dead in his tracks. And as a result, after the Lakota and the Arapaho and the Cheyenne left, General Crook, rather than stay around and help units like Custer, Crook disappeared with his 1,000-man plus unit, disappeared about 50 or 60 kilometers to the south near present-day Sheridan, Wyoming. And he just disappeared out into the plains and stayed there for weeks. The Battle of the Little Big Horn occurred, and Crook, with his large force, was nowhere to be found. When they finally did locate him, he said, "Oh, I was waiting for reinforcements to show up before I came back into the battle." But in the meantime, Custer and the entire 7th Cavalry paid the ultimate price with their lives.
We'll end up this video with continuing our drive through the park with more interpretive signs. Overall, and a very informative and kind of a somber place.
To find out about the Indian leaders and the horse that survived the battle, Comanche, just Google this address.
Like it says along the bottom there, Google the little @ sign, @DonBarnett5090, hit the word playlist and scroll down to the one that says the Great Plains of the USA, and you'll find that this video and the other video and others in that playlist. Hit the subscribe button, and that'll tell you when we're putting videos up on the internet again, and we're going to be keeping doing that. So as we roll on down the trail, we'll see you around the next corner. This is I Go Travel with Don Barnett.